Somewhere on the Danube frontier, late in the 2nd century, an emperor could not sleep. He was past 50. The plague that history would name after his family had killed millions of his subjects, and the dying was not over. The war against the tribes across the river was older than some of his soldiers. His own children kept dying, 8 of them, eventually, before he did. His most trusted general had briefly declared himself emperor, then been killed by his own officers. It spared Marcus a civil war, but not the knowledge that a friend had decided he had to die for Rome to be safe. In a tent, by a lamp, in the middle of a night that was going badly, the most powerful man in the Western world reached for a notebook and started writing to himself. He never gave the notebook a title. He never showed it to anyone. He almost certainly believed it would be burned with the rest of his private effects after he was dead. We have it anyway. I want to talk today about what was actually happening on those pages, not the philosophy of the meditations. The philosophy is everywhere now, on coffee mugs and bookshelves. I want to talk about the act of writing them, the 3 a.m. of it. Start with the title, because the title is the first lie we tell ourselves about this book. In Greek, what Marcus wrote was called ta eis huton, things to himself, or just to himself. It is the most literal title imaginable. Not a treatise, not a meditation in the modern sense which suggests a composed and finished thought, just the bare description of the direction the words point, from him to him, a closed loop. Somewhere in the centuries of copying that kept the manuscript alive, that title got smoothed into Meditations, which sounds like a book you might write on purpose. The original sounds like what it actually was, a man writing in the 2nd person to his own reflection. Read it that way, and the strange features of the text stop being strange. The repetitions stop being repetitions, and start being a man circling back to a lesson he keeps forgetting. He returns to impermanence and the brevity of life dozens of times across the 12 books. Not because he is building a curriculum, but because the lessons do not stick. Because the next morning the courtier is still annoying, the dispatch from the front is still bad, the body is still aging, and he needs to remember again what he already knows. The fragments stop being fragments and start being entries. Some passages run 2 lines, some run a page. They follow each other in no apparent order. This is what a notebook looks like. And the famous book 1, the long opening list of debts. From my grandfather, good morals. From my mother, piety. It is a man making a private inventory of everyone who shaped him. This is the book, a notebook. A private discipline kept by a man using writing the way a runner uses a track, to put in reps that nobody else needed to see. There are 2 ways to write, and the Meditations is one of them, and almost none of what we read today is. Most writing is performance, not vain necessarily, but shaped by the awareness of a reader. You finish sentences, you smooth edges. You let the version of you that arrives at the conclusion stand in for the version that stumbled toward it. The other kind of writing is the kind you do to keep yourself sane. It does not have a reader. It can repeat. It can lecture you. Its purpose is not to communicate. Its purpose is to do something to the person writing it. The Stoics had a word for this practice. Hyponemata, notes to oneself, reminders, the scaffolding you build so that what you have learned does not slip out of you between one crisis and the next. Pierre Hadot, who spent his career on this, argued that ancient philosophy was not primarily a set of doctrines. It was a set of practices, spiritual exercises. You learned Stoicism by repeating the arguments to yourself, in writing, every day, until they became reflexes. When Marcus writes, when you wake, tell yourself the people you deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, and arrogant. He is not making a clever observation. He is rehearsing. He is doing the morning rep. When he writes at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. He is the emperor of the known world and also a man who does not want to get up, using a sentence to push himself upright. This is not content. This is not even philosophy the way we usually mean it. This is a man maintaining the inside of his own head with the only tool he has. Which brings us to the uncomfortable part. We were not supposed to read this. There is no version in which a man writing for posterity confesses that he is still failing to be patient, still vain, still afraid of the indignities of getting older. A man writing for posterity edits those out. A man writing for himself leaves them in, because they are the whole point. The manuscript is, by the standards of ancient survival, a near miracle. The text vanishes for centuries at a time. A Byzantine bishop quotes it, then silence, then it surfaces in a single manuscript we have since lost. We have it because some unnamed monk thought it was worth the labor of one more copy, and then another, across 1,000 years of fragile parchment. We owe it, at minimum, the courtesy of reading it as what it is, not a self-help book a Roman emperor wrote for our use, a private notebook, a man at 3 a.m. in a tent trying to remember what he had learned before the next morning could make him forget it again. Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. That is not a wisdom drop. It is a man reminding himself, after a bad day, of where he goes when he cannot trust the outside. These are not lessons. These are someone else's marginalia. We are reading them over his shoulder by an accident of history he did not authorize. The least we can do is read them carefully. I want to end on what this might mean for our own writing, because the Meditations opens a door most modern journaling has quietly closed. Most of us, when we journal, are still half performing. We write for the version of us that will read this back in a year. Even alone, we have an audience. The audience is usually our future self, dressed up to look like a stranger. The practice of hyponymata assumes no audience, not even your future self. The point is not to be read. The point is to do something to you now while you write it, to pass the lesson through your hand, until it is not a quote you remember but a reflex you have built. You do not need to be an emperor to do this. You do not need a war or a plague, though you may have some version of those. You need a notebook, a quiet half hour, and the willingness to write the thing you already know down one more time. The point is not the notebook. The point is what the notebook does to you. Marcus kept doing it for years, by lamp, in tents, on campaigns, while the world he was responsible for shook around him. He kept doing it knowing nobody would read it, which is the only condition under which the practice fully works. We get to read it because the practice outlived him by accident. The gift is not the wisdom. The gift is the proof that the practice is possible, that a man with every reason to be unmoored could, with nothing more than a notebook and a habit, hold himself together long enough to do the work in front of him. If we owe Marcus anything, it is this: not to quote him, to try the practice he was practicing, to write, sometimes, the way he wrote, not for anyone, not even ourselves later, but for the person we have to be tomorrow morning when we open our eyes and the day is already hard. I'll leave you with one line from Book 7. Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. He wrote that to himself. It is still true if you write it to yourself. Good luck with the digging.